Welcome to Jane Austen's house here in Chawton in Hampshire, England. This house is where Jane Austen lived for the last 8 years of her life, from July 1809 until May 1817, and it's where she wrote and revised for publication all 6 of her globally beloved novels. We're here with Andrew Davies, the renowned screenwriter who created the beloved BBC adaptation of Pride and Prejudice in 1995, so we're also celebrating the 30th anniversary of that seminal production. This event is co-produced by Montfort University, so it will be hosted by Professor Justin Smith, who is the keeper of the Andrew Davies archive at Montfort, and it will also feature Susie Conklin on that incredible production 30 years ago. So without further ado, let's go inside. We're going to do the event in the drawing room, which is just at the heart of the house. It's where Jane Austen herself read Pride and Prejudice aloud for the first time, so it's a really, really special place to be, and I really hope that you enjoy this event as much as we do.
Welcome to the delightful setting of Jane Austen's house at Chawton. 2025 marks the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen's birth, but also 30 years since the BBC's landmark adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. The one that made Mr. Darcy a household name and launched the phenomenon of Austen mania, which is celebrated here in a special exhibition this year. I'm delighted to be joined in this trip down memory lane by 2 of the creative architects of this adaptation. Screenwriter Andrew Davies, who has adapted virtually everything from House of Cards to War and Peace, and whom leading adaptation scholar Simone Murray has called our only adaptation auteur. You know you're important when academics use French words about you.
Yes.
And Susie Conklin, screenwriter as well, of course, and producer, who was script editor on the 1995 Pride and Prejudice, and afterwards co-wrote a wonderful book with the producer Sue Birtwistle about the making of the series. I'd also like to extend a very warm welcome to our special invited audience of Austenites here today, and very much so to 2 actors who had leading roles in the production. Susannah Harker, who played Jane Bennet, and Crispin Bonham-Carter, who became her on-screen husband, the terribly nice and very wealthy Mr. Bingley. Andrew, let me begin by asking you, where did all this start? What's the origins of Pride and Prejudice for you?
Well, the way it started was that Sue Birtwistle and I were watching late 80s adaptation of Northanger Abbey, which we were quite enjoying, and Sue leaned over to me and said, what you and I should do is a really sexy adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Sue had been a student of mine years before, and we had done things together. We'd done things for children together, notably a series about Marmalade Atkins, a naughty girl. So we were happy working together. We were a good working partnership. This is a rather long story, but you won't mind, I hope. Sue decided to try and sell it to ITV, sell the idea to ITV, because she had a very good relationship with a senior executive producer there called Nick Elliott. And she said Nick Elliott would love this. And she took Nick Elliott to lunch. She knew Nick Elliott had 4 daughters. And she said, Nick, I've got this wonderful novel that Andrew Davies is going to adapt for us. It's about this man who's got 4 teenage girls, They're all raging with hormones. He doesn't know what to do with them. He needs to marry them off. And it's a story about the ins and outs of all that. And it's funny and it's romantic. And he says, great. Can we meet the author? Can we take her to lunch? And Sue said, well, no, because she's been dead for a couple of centuries, but you love the idea, and so why not commission it? So he said, right, I'll commission 3 episodes. So I went away and wrote 3 episodes. And we came back with them, and Nick Elliott liked them. But his boss, who was very much of the football persuasion, really, he didn't like stuff about girls much. He said he didn't think this material was very ITV. So we took it to the BBC, and Michael Waring at the BBC said, oh, you know, I don't like this sort of girly stuff myself very much. I like something more a bit urban and gritty. But I'm not altogether against period. And he said, I'll tell you what, do Middlemarch first, and if that works, I might let you do Pride and Prejudice. So it took a very long time to get to the screen, because I had to abandon Pride and Prejudice with its 3 episodes, do the whole of Middlemarch. And that in itself was a pretty rocky story, but not the subject of this. And that was when I met Susie here, who was a wonderful script editor. And she was a BBC trainee then. She had very little experience, but she was terrific judgment and courage, really, saying difficult things to powerful people. Anyway, she was great on Middlemarch, and I said to Sue, we've got to have Susie a script editor, and Sue said, oh, I don't need script editors. I've never used a script editor. I can do all that myself. And I said, just meet her. I think you'd like her. And she did. And they became.
What do you remember?
They quickly.
She terrified me.
But you became kind of best friends, didn't you? And in fact, I think of Sue as having stolen you from me. You know, because you were always doing stuff with Sue after that. And anyway, I have so many sad stories in my life. I haven't had much luck. Really.
Oh no! No, clearly.
And
glass half empty.
And anyway, we all got together, and we got it together, and
right after Middlemarch.
And once it was underway, and the problem stopped there, really. It was beautifully cast. We loved the director. I think the cast loved the director. Simon, he was such a gentleman.
Yeah, it was night and day, wasn't it? The 2 productions, just in terms of smoothness compared to what we had just done.
The Middlemarch.
Yeah, that was very hard.
From a script editor's point of view, Susie, what did you and Sue work together much on Andrew's script? You know, after once it got into production.
To be honest, not a great deal. Truthfully, on that one, I think Andrew's first 3 scripts were already fantastic. You 2 had worked on those a lot before they came to the BBC. So we spent more time on the last 3, which you wrote once we got going. And then I think my memory of it was a lot of thinking about which you had already formulated, but just had to do, bringing Mr. Darcy's story alive, because that second half is so much about them separated. So how to tell that kind of story, and lots of letters. But we worked we worked, the three of us, typically, you know, soon I would do No Skin, then the three of us would meet. But it was, yeah, that was a lovely collaborative business as I remember it.
Andrew, when you write, do you have actors in mind?
Not usually, not usually.
Right.
I usually have a kind of idealized picture in my head of
Right.
who it is,
Right.
who, and then they cast somebody, and I either think, oh no.
Except for Mr. Bingley.
With Sarah, of course.
But actually, Mr. Bingley is an exception. I mean, Crispin was, and in a way still is, Mr. Bingley. But no, everybody else was so good.
So was Colin Firth a shoe-in for Mr. Darcy?
Well, not quite.
Ah.
Not quite. He was for Sue because Sue gets a lot of her opinions from Richard Eyre, I think, especially about actors, because Richard's worked in the theatre with the absolute best people for God knows how long. So he gives very good advice about actors, and my only reservation about Colin was that he was fair to Ginger, and I said, Mr. Darcy is. It's not like that. He's got to be dark, and Sue said, "Oh, we'll make him dye his hair," and he did, and he stayed dark as long as it was.
And she had worked with Colin as well. She had done one or two things, hadn't she? Dutch Girls, maybe.
Oh yes,
I believe.
But that was when he was young, wasn't it? Because he was playing a school.
Sort of young.
He was playing a schoolboy, and
well, sort of teenage.
Sixth form.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So she had worked with him, and she thought he had sort of the kind of qualities she was looking for. So she did know with that, but he wasn't an obvious shoe-in for the. I think he wasn't an obvious shoe-in for the commissioners in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
And talking of hair colour, of course, Jennifer E was blonde.
Yes. Yeah, very fair.
Yeah.
That's right. She had to go dark as well.
Yeah. So what do you remember of her
The
audition?
chamomile lawn.
That's
She
right.
Yeah.
so gorgeous in that, wasn't she?
Absolutely, and she was as you'll remember, she was so wanting to play Lizzie in Idea for It. So she had dyed her eyebrows, I think, in the beginning, so that she could just show that she could color dark or whatever. But what was great is we then did. We did rehearsals. We did those ones where we filmed some auditions and we put them in costume, and so we wigged her, as they say, and just to see if it would work, and it absolutely did. And as soon as we saw those, it was obvious. Yeah, that was. But it was one of those things, and normally you don't care about the coloring. It's not always that it matters, but sometimes for a certain part or for a famous book it did. But that were great. Also for Susie, so we wanted to have the contrast with Jane and Lizzie. Right. So we wanted to make the two of you look more.
I guess. Yeah.
That's right, as I remember it.
Because Jane Austen doesn't really say anything very much about hair colouring and colour of eyes. Just occasionally she does, but but you get this very firm idea in your head somehow of how they look.
And do you remember that read through, Andrew? I mean, what's it like when you hear your words, or indeed Jane Austen's words, come off the page for the first time?
Well, it's terrific, really, and I think it was a very good read through because all the actors had spent a long time learning the dances and having a lot of fun like that, and had got to know each other in a very unactory sort of, very jolly natural sort of way. And so they weren't afraid to, give their performances a bit of welly at the read-through. And even so, Alison Steadman was a bit of a shock.
I think Alison started, my memory is Alison started that because she just sort of like
Sure.
out of the gates with that great line. And because sometimes readers really aren't there for like everyone likes them for different reasons. Usually I know actors, it's really could be
I can't stand it when actors mumble through read-throughs.
They're hard because the context with them is just that for us they're so valuable to hear the scripts read and to actually hear the dialogue being spoken by the actors. So we're looking at it thinking, oh, is that a bit wordy? Is that like did that flow from this to this, or are we missing so we're kind of thinking it from a script term, not in terms of a performance, but it's just hearing the actor say it. But it's difficult because sometimes there can be some execs that come along and there's you could feel like, is this really supposed to perform? It's not supposed to be a performance. It's a big cast. That was a big room of people. So Alison just sort of, just
went for it. Yeah.
which was great. So, but I think the actors would have a different story of whether it was fun or not.
So you got this wonderful cast assembled, including the gorgeous Susannah and Crispin. And somewhere along the line, the word gets out, this is a raunchy production of Jane Austen.
Oh, it was actually, it was long before.
Okay.
Because it's my fault. But what happens, you get interviewed by journalists about, and you want to talk about whatever you're supposed to be publicizing, which is the show that's just coming on. But of course, what you're interested in is what you're currently writing or what you're thinking of writing. So they say, you're thinking of anything else? And I said, yeah, I'm going to do this really sexy adaptation, Pride and Prejudice. And they thought, particularly the Daily Mail thought, oh, this is wonderful to start a story about all this. So they imagined all the kind of things you could have in a sexy adaptation, where all the sex acts were going to take place, sort of haylofts and meadows and things like that, and all this immense publicity, which was very much of the kind of, is there any kind of bad publicity, or is it actually quite good? And I think on the whole it was, it created a sense of anticipation.
And also maybe just the context was when we were making that, which is that a lot of period adaptations had been done in the 70s and 80s, earlier, and it was a period, because this is just when I was joining at the BBC, where they were trying to get away from that, just get away from what felt a little bit like heritage-y TV. And Michael Waring, who commissioned it, he was famous for these kind of really powerful shows like Boys from the Back. So there were some tremendous things he produced. So the feeling was, oh, you're going back to doing, period drama. Oh, but you're going to do it in a sexed up way. There was a lot of kind of concern about what could that mean, and we're like, no, we're just bringing it to life. It's on film. It's not, it's not in a studio. So,
and your opening scene in Pride and Prejudice is perhaps the most wonderful example of that, in terms of a departure from the beginning of the novel, but precisely about that sense of bringing the book to life.
Yeah, I was determined not to start with her opening, if I could do it. And I'd recently been to a big seminar about how to write scripts by Robert McKee.
The doyen.
And he stood there and shouted at us for 3 days. But some of the things he said really stuck in my mind. And one of them was, when there is sex, put it right on the spine of the story, which was how Susannah got to have this affair with Francis Harker, because that wasn't in the book at all, in House of Cards. And the other one is to discover the inciting incident and start with that. And the inciting incident is whatever gets the story going. And what gets the story going is these two sexy young men riding into the what's she called? Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Countryside on their big horses in their tight breeches, and seeing Netherfield Hall. So I thought, let's start with that. And I was so pleased when I'd written the first page. I ran upstairs and made my daughter read it, and she said, "Very good, Dad." Yeah. So that was all right, and then we carried on.
Yeah.
But I'd always meant to do quite a pro-Darcy adaptation and foreground Darcy a bit, because if you read the book, as you all know, you're like 7/8 of the way through the book before you realise what a good chap Darcy is, really. And I wanted to give the audience some sense of this chap and what his intimate life was like, and that he did do ordinary things like have a bath and play with the dog and things like that.
But although your opening introduces the central male characters, of course, it also tells us an awful lot about Elizabeth too, because she, she's walking down the hill and suddenly she breaks into a trot and it demonstrates, tremendous sort of vigor, and we learn a lot from her, and I think, perhaps it's characteristic of your adaptations and what you brought to Jane Austen is that sense of it being filmed and it being in the landscape.
Sure. I mean, that was a huge advantage that we had. We had a much bigger budget than costume dramas had, especially acknowledged classics.
Right.
They used to be put on at tea time and were thought of as partly children's shows, and they had very small budget. I mean, if it was a battle scene, you'd see they could only afford 3 horses, so you see them go round and round. Seen that one before.
And Susie, as the script editor, you spent a lot of time on set. Yep. On location for
most of this.
Yeah, I mean, was it a happy production?
It definitely was, and I think you learn more in retrospect sometimes, what makes it a happy production, amongst many things. But key things are that the scripts are really, really worked through and solid, and they were. That doesn't always happen on shows. It should, but it doesn't always for all kinds of reasons. So I think that made everyone confident, and it's a great story. And Suber was the producer, was a tremendous sort of force on that side. Like she felt passionate about the book. I remember the first day of filming where it was only my second production, but there was. Inevitably you arrive and you cannot believe how many people are there. It's just the reality of a crew and all the various and she's like, "Oh, and I said, "Wow." And she just said, "I'm going to enjoy every day of this." Like it was just a sense of, it took you guys a long time from the beginning to get there. It was, it's just hard to get things made, even something that's good. So yeah, I think so. Inevitably, there's always problems. Might be a problem with a location. There might be all kinds of things go wrong. It's inevitable. There's dances. Those are really complicated to do. So things had to be tweaked, but it wasn't like we were trying to reinvent big scenes, or sometimes in a show you might even think, actually, that storyline's not quite working and you're trying to make tweaks, but that wasn't the case. So that helped.
And another characteristic, of course, is you're blessed with the wonderful production design of Jerry Scott.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jerry, who we worked with on Middlemarch and is a sort of, she was a legendary producer, production designer, and she was just had a great personality, a great sense of life, but she understood what it needed. And she was really early on saying, we've just got to get the scale. The first thing we need to find is the right scale between those three houses so that you absolutely understand visually where, because we look at a house like this and think, this is rather nice, I'd live here. And it's like, how do you get that scale of who that family are compared, particularly to Darcy? And so she was great, but all that detail, her design team were remarkable. They would do these drawings for the things that were built.
And the BBC had a different structure then. She worked for the BBC.
That's right, actually.
And she had a team of people who she trained.
That's absolutely
who are now or production designers themselves. But that doesn't happen now.
No, it's much harder.
You've got to.
Yeah.
I don't know how they learn. You've got to just hang around.
It's harder because you're right.
Hang around like hungry dogs around somebody who's really good at it and will tolerate you.
Yeah. And you have the difficulty now, which is because you're not staff, like you got to find your next job, and you're hoping it's going to be with that designer you're working with, but you might have to. So keeping a team together is harder than it used to be. But yeah, I think on screen on a lot of those dramas of that period, that's what you got was just that collective experience.
Writers don't have these problems. I just sit at home going.
Yeah. That's right.
Although the second half of the Pride and Prejudice gives a screen adapter quite a few challenges, especially in terms of the number of letters. And dealing with letters on screen is a bit tricky, isn't it?
But yes, it was. But it's kind of, as another thing Robert McKee said, every problem is an opportunity in disguise. And things like... Darcy writes this great long letter to Elizabeth explaining, it's round about quite early, at the beginning of episode 4, I think. So just over halfway through the book, justifying his objections to her family and also explaining the history of his relationship with Mr. Wickham. And if you dramatize that, which is what I did, of course, was you're showing Darcy as a boy and as a young man. He's just got one friend, and they play together. And this friend totally lets him down, and on top of that, nearly seduces Darcy's beloved little sister. And we see all this, and we see her. We see Georgiana, who I was going to say, if there's a fault in the book, is there a fault? But it would have been nice to see Georgiana in some proper scenes, because she barely registers the first time you read the book. And in fact, she's very important to Darcy. And of course, I mean, if you think of her as a person, she's very important to herself as well. But for my purposes, she was there to show Darcy as a loving, caring brother. He successfully spoiled the seduction, but he doesn't tell her off. He just tenderly puts his arms around her. And she's happy. She's not frightened of him. She knew he would do that. And you think, and the audience think, wow, Darcy is tender with girls, is he? There's more to him that meets the eye. And this is like about bit more than halfway through the story. So they're getting a glimpse of a Darcy who is really heroic.
And bringing that emotion to life in a way that you can miss it in the book. I think when I first read that, the book. As a teenager, I don't know that
she keeps dropping things in that you have to be really alert to catch, like in Sense and Sensibility. At one point, Colonel Brandon, when questioned by the sensible one, Sister Eleanor, who says, "Did you ever see Willoughby again?" He said, "One meeting there had to be. We met this one time. I to punish his conduct, his to defend it." I thought, my God, it's a duel. It's a duel. We must see this duel. And I thought, and I wrote this duel in which Colonel Brandon satisfactorily beats up Willoughby, who is trembling and begging for mercy, more or less.
The other thing, perhaps, Jane Austen glosses over, because she knows that her readers know exactly what they mean, the function of the balls, the dances, and that was, getting those set pieces right, Susie, was a challenge of the production, but a triumph of it as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, credit. It's
including
people had to dance and act who had
it's difficult to talk when you're dancing. Actually, I wonder if they really did talk while they were dancing. Wouldn't those conversations really have taken place while they were standing still, waiting for their turn to come down the line?
Right, and
but it's better the way.
Well, yeah, particularly I think that key dance between Darcy and Elizabeth, and to me that was a great example of a scene that you bring to life from a book. What a drama can do, right? Because it was, and there was just all those layers of with our.
And it's got this music.
It's Jane Gibson who did the choreography, finding the right dance. Talking about terrifying. Yeah, she was amazing choreographer. She is amazing, but just different. But finding the right dance, because we wanted to create this sense of sparring. It's almost like a sort of tango-y like thing, right? But the sparring. So finding the right dance, and then you'd written it already, but then just sort of fine-tuning that so that she basically does her sort of, stab, and then he has to go around and wait a minute to get his, but doing that, but then finally actually filming that with, Steadicam and everyone else dancing, and it was challenging, but it did, I do love it, because I think that does bring it to life.
Absolutely wonderful. Susannah, what do you remember about the dances?
We were just she was very disciplined and was very, very strict. And that was good, because we were really drilled, so we were able to then just do the work, and just be and relate to each other as the characters, because she stood at the top with a stick or something.
She had a stick,
and beat out the rhythm. And it was there was a lot around.
She didn't beat you, did she?
No, she didn't.
So it was quite a hierarchy in who could dance, because there were the dancers.
Yes.
The sort of extras who were all trained dancers.
They were her
dancers.
Brilliant dancers.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there were, I suppose, sort of the worst dancers were Colin and Jenny, because they had so much. They were in so many scenes. They were never getting time to rehearse. I remember Colin like going, what do I do now? We were sort of shoving him along.
He had to do a lot. It was good, because a lot of his key shots were just kind of.
Well, did a lot of close-ups.
Yeah, close-ups.
Just see what his feet are doing.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to pause at this moment, Andrew, and ask you about the big scene, that scene that everybody talks about and has talked about ever since, the lake scene. How did you get that idea?
Well, it wasn't supposed to be, sexy in really any particular way. I just had this idea, really, because I was, as I've said, continually trying to think, what's Darcy feeling? Let's keep the audience parallel with him in a way, and at this time, he's been in London hosting a rather boring house party with stuffy bores and snobs. And he's coming back to Pemberley to host another house party in his country house with the same bloody people. And you think he'd be thinking, oh God, you know. And he must have been so glad to get a day of his own where nobody's making any demands on him. And it's a hot summer's day, and he arrives at his house and he sees his lake. Very nice. I think, there's my lake. I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to just take everything off and plunge into the cool water and, you know, forget about everything, except the fact that I'm alive.
And I think in your original script,
Good
you
health.
did take everything off as well.
He did, yes. That was one of the few arguments that Sue and I had, and of course she won.
But curiously, if you'd have taken everything off, we wouldn't have the iconic wet shirts, would we?
Well, he might have just, he could have pulled his, you know, because if he'd gone in naked, he probably wouldn't have gone in the house naked. He'd have kind of pulled enough things on to look half decent. So it could have been, the same.
I suppose from Sue's point of view was to have the shirt on. Again, it wasn't about trying to create a sexy, iconic shot from her point of view either. It was just if the shirt.
It's a funny scene.
If the shirt is on, then you're not thinking about, oh, there's a naked Darcy. You're just thinking that he's undressed in terms of how he's ever been seen and so on. And so then it's amusing and interesting that they are both caught off guard, but it's not that is
it's really interesting that Andrew just described that entirely from Darcy's sort of internal monologue in a way. So did you never stop and think, what are an audience, what are journalists going to make of this scene? Or was that
No, I don't think about that sort of thing when I'm writing. I just think, you know, sometimes it's much harder because thinking about Darcy, I was thinking, you know, if I was Darcy, what would I do? Very much like that. If I'm writing a scene with a 15-year-old girl, it's harder, you know, but at the same time, I'm trying to put myself in her head and think, what's she thinking? What's she going to do? What's she going to do next?
Yeah.
But I mean, we definitely thought of it. I mean, he's our hero, and he's handsome, and he's got those shirts are so fabulous, and you know he's going to look gorgeous. But it wasn't ever crafted as a sexy. It was just that it would be wonderful that you do what you say about his sort of sense of just being him and release, and then he's kind of. He's earthy in the way sort of Lizzie is in that opening shot in episode 1. It's just him, and it's not all the stuff around him.
On Elizabeth,
yes,
of the effect that wet shirt would have had on her. So there must have been a degree of consciousness of sex.
A little bit, I guess. But I think in that scene where they're having the conversation, I was thinking mostly about how funny it was that they're both too well-bred to mention the fact that he's dripping wet.
And because she's so mortified,
and they don't know what to say, and they're
registering it. She can't think of anything other than, oh my God, he's found me at his house. This is horrifying.
And that became the iconic memory of the whole production in some way for so many, many millions of people across the world who've never read Jane Austen. But even on its first broadcast, it achieved fantastic audience figures, 10 million. Broke all records for the BBC. I mean, Susie, did it surprise you, the reception that it got?
I think yes and no, for sure. I definitely thought we had a fantastic show. So it wasn't that I was surprised people loved it, but that it sort of took off in some way in the public imagination the way it did. Sure. I mean, it was a kind of for whatever reason, things happen like that at a certain moment in time. It became, it sort of represented more, and it than I would have guessed. But we definitely knew it was special. But you just never know how something's.
I mean, Middlemarch had been judged a success.
Yes.
But it had much smaller audience.
Yeah, I don't know what we had, but it wasn't like
kind
that.
of.
We were also BBC Two, and at the time
BBC
when it
Two,
wasn't,
yeah.
it wasn't considered. You know, it was a little bit more of a already undertaking. But yeah, I definitely surprised, and it was written about everywhere, and everyone seemed to be watching. We were surprised. Of course, pre-streaming days, it was nice because people actually did.
And it was a bit of a gamble putting it on BBC One, I guess, because those things mattered in which channel you were on.
Yeah.
In those days.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the sort of popular at the time. The popular BBC Two. It's changed now a lot, but BBC Two is where you would put sort of more serious drama, but
it was out and out popular. Yeah, yeah, and I suppose it for sure changed the way period drama is done and the popularity. But the last thing I want to ask you both is in a sense, how did it change your own lives, your own careers, Andrew?
Well, yes, it changed mine in a big way, really. I mean, almost immediately, I got commissioned by ITV to do Moll Flanders, which didn't cause quite as much as a sensation, but got an even bigger audience.
Yeah, we got.
And yeah, it was that people seemed to think there might be money in these classic dramas, and that was obviously very good for me because I'm one of the very few people who's made a lot of money out of having done an English literature degree. Which
probably several people in the room sympathise with you. Yes. Yeah.
Well, and any one of you could have done the same.
Susie, what about you?
Yeah, it changed my career. I mean, a lot. Yes, definitely, because I was just at the beginning of my drama career. We'd done so maybe 3 years in, having done Middlemarch and straight on to Pride and Prejudice. And I think when something is that popular, it definitely opened doors for other projects. Tons of them. It was transformative, but it definitely felt as well, which I think about a lot, that it did open doors, huge doors as well, for lots of period adaptations. But I've always felt cautious about that because it still wants to be. They were done, both those projects, but certainly Pride and Prejudice was done because of the passion of the producer and the writer to make that story, rather than let's pull another book off the shelf and pop it out. So I think I still feel sort of protective of it in that way, that like by all means people should do all kinds of adaptations and do other Jane Austens. But yeah, if it comes from a real passion from the writer and the producer, then that's the way to go, I think.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now we've got some time for questions. We have a roving microphone.
Oh,
there we are. That's the question spell. And we also have Susannah and Crispin in the audience as well. So over to you.
Thank you so much. I would love to have people look at Colin Keith Johnston from 1935, because I think Olivier can't hold anything to what he did in that stage play by Helen Jerome. Anyway, I have a different question. It's about the elongation. And of course, it's perfect as it is, and it should be no more than 6 parts. But today they would probably have 8, right? Or you would have even perhaps more time. Are there things that ended up on the cutting room floor that you could tell us about? And if not, if you had a chance to make it even longer, what might you have done?
No, this is one I think that nothing much ended up on the cutting room floor.
Which is unusual, by the way. That's a very unusual, but you're right.
It was, the scripts were well timed. And and I wouldn't. I'm stuck with it. I think the final proposal scene is a bit awkward somehow. There's too much walking, not enough standing still, and the men in this production, as in many other period productions, seem to use their walking sticks as if to compensate for an injury, whereas people use their walking sticks more as sword substitutes to swing about and knock the heads off dandelions and things. And I think Colin was limping a bit on his.
Oh gosh,
or
I'm gonna have
he wasn't using his stick in a convincing Regency way.
Do you remember how you were using your stick, Crispin?
I can't remember at all.
I think it was impeccable. Yes.
I don't remember any of this.
I can't imagine. Because true class will tell. Yeah, absolutely. It's nothing to do with acting. It's in the blood.
I would say on the length front, just a entirely subjective one. I don't think Pride and Prejudice would work well in 8 parts. I don't.
I wanted to do it in 5 to start with.
I think 6 for me personally is just an opinion, is just probably the most you would want to do. I think it might. You're right, things go longer often, but we still do make 4 parts and 6 parts depending. Funnily enough, often you find 5 is ideal, and then the commissioners hate it. They hate these odd numbers, so you go 4 or 6 for some reason. But being able to dramatize those letters, that was great. But if you did that any longer, I think you would lose the tension, because it's a tricky balance, isn't it, when they're separated. So. That one, I mean, you could probably, obviously it's been told as a 2-hour, you could probably do a version that was 4 for that particular, but yeah.
Who else has a question? Becca.
I was wondering if there was a particular character you were really excited to sort of write the dialogue for. There was one that stood out that you were looking forward to.
Well, the thing is, Jane Austen has already written the dialogue for these characters, so it's more a case of editing. There was a particular character that I thought there was a different way of doing him, and I kind of wanted to, and I think Sue talked me out a bit, and that's Mr. Bennet, who you could see him as a really useless guy, just about all he's done in his life is seduce this woman who becomes Mrs. Bennet. I mean, he does the decent thing by her and marries her. But I think that probably Jane was born only, 5 or 6 months after the wedding. And he spent the rest of his time doing nothing. The first few years he's hoping to have a boy. And then after that, he's kind of given up. And he just lies around his study, making witty remarks at the expense of his wife and his 3 younger daughters. So you'd cast somebody who was used to playing pretty sleazy guys.
Yeah, and I get why she didn't go with that, Sue. On the record.
And Benjamin Whitray's wonderful.
So do I. So do I.
But I do think...
I'd love to see it done sometime.
No, but I do think that scene when when Lizzie tells her dad, that she's getting married, and it says he's the best man I know. I think that's quite stark, because she loves her father, but she is saying to her father, the man I'm marrying is the best man I know. And I feel like there is
There's a point to that remark. Yes.
It bites a bit, but I think he does come across.
And he knows that about himself.
He does. I think he is self-aware.
Yeah.
I think he, especially once Lydia runs away, you do feel.
Yeah. But it's much nicer watch if you play him as a thoroughly nice man.
Yeah, but still useless. I still think he's comes across.
But useless.
Right.
Yeah.
Because people use it, and I really like this as a comfort blanket. If they're feeling bad, they think, let's get Pride and Prejudice out again. And I feel like that myself. You know, if it's on, I think, I'll just watch 5 minutes and finish up watching the whole thing.
Yeah.
Are you sometimes conscious that your interpretation of characters might be different from Jane Austen's interpretation of characters?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the fun of it, really. I think you don't want to completely violate what she's trying to do, but yeah, I mean, she was, from the letters, what letters we have, she's so rude and so sharply critical of a lot of people, almost everybody except Cassandra, that you think, she might have been, she might have quite liked my version of Mr. Bennet that I wasn't allowed to do. But yeah, I think if you're adapting it, it is a difficult question because you're only doing it because you like the book.
Oh, we've always said, like, when people ask questions about adaptations, because that you can get angry people like, you've just done that wrong and that's completely wrong, and
you've ruined the whole book for me.
I mean,
yes,
you get it in the ear and you just think, it's an interpretation. It's just an adaptation. That book is there, and it's like a play being put on. That it's every time it's different. It's you're not trying. And in fact, I've certainly, perhaps you've had experiences where, if you're trying to be too earnestly, slavishly put a book onto screen and you don't put it through the lens of trying to interpret it for yourself, they can turn out quite flat, even though that's the opposite of what you're trying to do. We've all seen some of those where you're like, what went wrong? So the book's always there, right? It's
yeah.
But in an audience with a number of Austen scholars, it's fair to say that Austen's scholars were, on the whole, very kind.
They've been awfully nice about it, really. And even if they don't agree with what you've done, they kind of understand why you've done it. Deirdre Le Fay was the famous one. Do you know? Have you heard of her? We
had some.
I mean, she was so. I mean, she was this extraordinary thing, a self-made scholar, and she really was scholarly. And she came up to me after this, and she said, "Mr. Davies, I would give you 7 out of 10 for your adaptation, and that is high praise from me." And then she went on to passionately denounce the pen that Darcy was using when he was writing that letter in episode 4. Said pens like that weren't invented until
your
30 years later.
We're like, if you were noticing the quill, this man is like, giving his heart and soul to writing this letter. I mean, it's obviously an adaptation made in the 90s, But yeah, we did pretty well overall with that.
Yeah. Time for one last question. Yes, Helena.
Going back to the other point that you were talking about, whether you're true to Jane Austen, I just was wondering whether when you're working on adaptations, you ever see them as an opportunity to actually say something about the writer themselves and perhaps the circumstances within which they were working or the period or the time.
I don't. It's kind of flummoxed me, that. I mean, you can only think about so many things when you when you're actually writing, and that kind of really wasn't one. I think of myself as, in a way, carrying on a sort of dialogue with the writer of the book, even if it's someone as brilliant as Jane Austen.
And we would, when you're in the development meetings and you're talking about, that's a story where we are, like, we do, you read widely in the biography. So we're talking about what was going on in her life, like what she knew from her brothers and what's kind of not literally on the page but around it. So I suppose we're quite aware of what there are, what her limitations might be, and what
she knew a lot from personal experience about being in a gentleman's family but not well off at all, and there are quite a few instances of people being given away at a young age.
Andrew Davies, Susie Conklin, Susannah, Harker, Crispin, Bonham-Carter.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much indeed.